So tonight's talk is the art and sound in gaming. So we have two speakers for you this evening. Sorry, I'll introduce myself first. My name's Emma and I'm facilitating this evening on behalf of South Dublin County Council, the library here, Contact Studio and Noise. So this evening's talk, as I said, is the art and sound in gaming. So the idea of this is to give you kind of an insight into two different aspects of games. When you think about games, a lot of people maybe think about the developers and things like that, but these are two of the more creative aspects, not to say that development isn't creative in its own way. So we have two speakers this evening. So we have Mick Keeley, who's a composer, producer and educator as well. So he'll be speaking to you this evening. And then we'll have Basil Lim. There was a change actually to the talk as advertised, so we have Basil Lim now speaking. He has his own startup company and he'll be telling you a bit more about that. So I'll pass you over now to, there's questions and comments cards on your seat. So this is just if you want to take note of any questions while the speakers are talking, and Tori will collect these off you at the end. So after the speakers talk, we'll have a Q&A session over here where you'll get a chance to ask any questions. The speakers will talk for about 10 minutes. The toilets are just outside the door and around the corner, and we'll be finishing up at about probably a bit before 7, and you'll have a chance to get some tea and coffee, and if you want to speak to either of the two speakers, you'll get a chance then. So I'll pass you over to Mick Keeley first. Mick? Thanks. So it's just the arrow, please.
Hi guys, thanks very much first of all for taking the time out to go and hear me babble on for 10 minutes or so. That I'm going to try and fit 30 years experience into 10 minutes. It's a challenge, but I'll certainly do my best. My name is Mick Keeley. I'm a composer. I've been a composer for film and television and radio, advertising, media globally for 10 years or more. I branched into video games in more recent years. 2010 was when I started in games, and I'm completely bitten by the bug of video games now. I'm not at playing them; I'm useless. But I've been involved in the process of making them. I started out after my Leaving Cert. I went a little bit astray towards my last couple of years in school, and got a little bit lost, but found myself back on track as soon as I discovered music. I wouldn't have been the most academic person in school, I suppose, but I discovered bands very shortly after I left school, and completely got bitten by that bug. So I spent a number of years playing in original bands, and then ended up playing in covers bands, and then I discovered that I was actually able to start to make a bit of a living out of music, and I was very happy to pursue that. And through the course of that, in about 96, I was in a band, and we were the house band on a television show here called Good Grief Moncrief, and I got to know some people in RTE, and around the same time I entered a really bad song in Eurovision, as you do if you're a musician in Ireland at some stage in your career, certainly in the 80s and the 90s. But there was one piece of that song that was the outro of the song, which I cut off, and it was like 30 seconds, and it was I thought it was a pretty cool piece of music that really worked. So I went to producers in RTE that I'd met there, and I said, because they had a Saturday chat show coming up with BB Baskin, who most of you won't remember, but it replaced the Late Late Show on a Saturday, and they were looking for a theme tune for that, if you like. So the theme tune for that had to be a certain way. I thought this piece of music would work, so I brought it along, and lo and behold, it did work, and they were delighted with it. So I ended up striking up a relationship with producers in RTE, and that's how I got into doing other TV stuff then over the years. So I did quite a lot in RTE, and then in radio as well. Then I branched into the UK and started getting placements with music and programs and stuff over there. That led to a couple of publishing deals in the UK. I got some publishing deals in the US then, and in Hollywood as well. But over the years, before I know it, I get IMRO statements now, and they come in, and the music gets placement in most countries, from Taiwan, Australia, France, Spain, even countries that I've never even heard of. All of a sudden, I see that they're using my music in their productions on their TV channels. So there's a great sense of achievement around that, and it also brings in few quid to pay the bills, which is always a great help. Back in 2010, I was scouting around trying to find a job. Things were a little bit quiet, so I was looking for some leads, as you do as a composer, to see what projects were in the pipeline. And I saw a blog on the internet somewhere that said that a company in the UK called Codemasters had just announced a first-person shooter for Xbox and PlayStation 3 at the AAA level. So, and that they needed a composer for it. So I sat down and I thought, if I ring these people, I'm probably not going to get past the front desk. So I realised I was going to have to be a little bit bold and innovative about how I approached them. So I rang them up and I told them that they were looking for me. And I said that somebody had told me to give you a call because I believe they were trying to get in touch with me about you need a composer for a game or something like that. So the person answered the phone and said, oh yes, that's right, I'll have to put you through to the audio manager. So she put me through to the audio manager, and that's when I didn't know what I was going to do. So once I got to this guy, because it's very hard to get to him otherwise, I basically pleaded my case and said, look, I know you're looking for a composer, any chance I can pitch. I haven't done games before, but it's going to cost you anything to let me pitch a demo. So he agreed, and he said, we're about to send out the pitch in 2 weeks' time, and if you want to send back a demo or 2 demos, it's up to you about what you send back. But be warned, it's going out to 37 composers that we would normally use on our books, and these composers are LA based and stuff, so it's very stiff competition. So I said, well, let's not worry about that. I said, thanks very much for including me in the pitch. So right enough, 2 weeks later, pitch arrived, and they were looking for 3 composers in the description. They wanted somebody to handle the orchestral stuff, they wanted somebody to handle the ethnic stuff, and they wanted somebody to handle the electronics stuff, and they wanted these 3 composers to work together. So I took those elements and I put a demo together, integrating those elements myself. I had gathered enough experience and knowledge in all those genres through my years of composing for TV and film and stuff. So I ended up winning the contract in the end anyway, and that set me on my way. I was delighted about that. But the one thing that was in my ally all through the stage when I started working, like from an age where you guys starting out, was the evolution of technology. Because before we had home studios, we used to have to go into recording studios, record with tape and stuff the old-fashioned way, and it was very expensive. It was something that bands used to have to save money to do in order to get to the next stage. But over the last 15, 20 years, the whole evolution of home studios became rapidly in development. So I used to pretty much, I had a rule for myself: half my fee that I would get on any one job, I would reinvest back in my home studio so that I would get the best software and the best equipment. And I started experimenting with the free stuff as well, which is what I really recommend, and like a GarageBand, for example, stuff like that. If you're familiar with that, there's loads of free stuff on the internet, shareware stuff as well, which is really great. So, but I started to reinvest to make sure that I had the tools to compete with the best of the guys, and that really stood to me in the end when I actually got this opportunity with the game. As I said, the company were Codemasters, and the game was a game called Body Count, and that was a journey of about a year composing that score, and it was really exciting because they gave me a budget for full symphony orchestra, and it was really exciting to do that and to score for that as well. And some elements of the game, the artwork in the game was top drawer. I mean, it really was a AAA production all around. I think they spent something like 60 million just developing the game, and it came under critical fire, excuse the pun, when it came out, but the music was appraised, and I was very happy about that. And then that led to me getting a call from, that was during the recording of the score. I got a call from, I don't know if anybody's familiar with a concert called Video Games Live. It's out of LA by a guy called Tommy Tallarico, and Tommy brings the symphony orchestra on a world tour, and they play video game music to mass audiences with a big screen, and they show footage from the game, and the orchestra perform the score, and it's a really exciting show. So Tommy rang me and he said, that would I like to go to South America and tour with them in Brazil, and they'd like to perform some of the Scorpion Body Count. Would I be interested in coming over? So I said I'd have to think about it for about 5 seconds, and I'm packing my bag now. So there was very little to think about there. So off I went, and that was a really exciting time. And then Tommy brought me on to the end of the concerts in Porto Alegre, in Rio, and in Sao Paulo, and we talked about the game and the score and the experience of it or whatever. So it's a really great show. Hopefully we'll get it to Ireland in the O2 or something like that. Keep an eye out for it. I really recommend it. It's absolutely brilliant. I mean, to do the music from The Legend of Zelda right down to Mario Brothers, World of Warcraft, you name it, all your favourite stuff is in there, and it's really great to see orchestral music performed in a show to this an extravaganza like this. There's laser shows and everything. It's absolutely brilliant. So on my return home, myself and my wife were on the flight home, and I felt really nervous because I was coming back home to Ireland, where I live and love to live, and that'll never change. But I turned to Maura and I said, I have a real sense that doors are closing now as we get back home, because there is no video game music culture in Ireland. There is no industry. Although there was talk about the growth of the games industry here, it lay more in the development of games and stuff. But at music and games, there just was absolutely no structure here. I'd become the first games composer in Ireland at AAA level, and there was basically no one else to hang out with, so to speak. And it was a bit daunting. It was like, how do I move forward from here, sort of thing. So that gave us an idea to set up an organisation called Games Music Ireland, and the purpose of that was to bring composers together that were already established in the industry with film and television and stuff, that wanted to bridge into video games but didn't really know how. Music for games and music for film is very different. One basic difference is that music and film is locked. Film is a locked media. In other words, you can watch a movie as many times as you want to. The music will always have the same emotional effect on the viewer at the same point in the movie, because it's locked to the movie to support a certain scene. In a game, that changes completely, because every time you play the game, or two players might play the game, and they might decide to play the game differently. They'll make different choices in the game, and the payoff in that is a different experience. So the music has to support the emotion of the player in whatever it is they decide to do in the game. So the music has to be able to change in the game, and that's a whole new science, and it's really exciting. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors involved and how you make that happen, but it opens a whole new world of interactive music, and that's where we're at now. Interactive music, we're on the cusp of the birth of something really exciting and really new. Video games is most definitely something that's here to stay, and it's a really exciting time to be, if you think about thinking about entering into that industry or into that world. It's a great time to be stepping into it. It's in its infancy, and there's a lot going to happen in the coming years. Some advice I'd give you about it, if you're gonna head down that road, is a lot of how you get on in industry is how people perceive you. It's very easy to set yourself up to be very like somebody else that that you think that industry likes or whatever, almost a copycat. Don't do that. It's really dangerous. On the other hand, don't be too out there and too different to everything, because that's just as dangerous, because people can't associate, or they don't maybe not understand quite artistically what you're trying to do. Somewhere in the middle is the happy medium. It is important to follow some kind of some kind of formula, but not lock into something that just becomes so stereotyped that it's not any different. So thinking outside the box is important, but not to be completely out there. So a balance somewhere. As I was saying, perception about how people see you. I knew the first thing that was going to happen once I started to look for work with various companies is that they go onto my website and try and check me out and just see what, what kind of impression they get. So I make sure that I have a nice studio shot on my website, and it gives a nice environment, looks very professional setup, and clients like to see that. In truth, I have no idea whose studio this is, because it's not mine. I bought this image off the internet just to place on my website because it looks better than the real thing. I really work from a studio like this, and the floor is dirty because I have very little time I get around to cleaning now and then, but it's not important how it looks. It's not important the aesthetics and stuff. What's important is what you get out of it, how you comfortable working in your environment and stuff. You don't have to have a flash studio. You can give the impression that you do. There's nothing wrong with that. But I've done so many film work and games and everything from this studio, and nobody ever comes in, so they don't need to know what it looks like. They're happy with what they hear comes from it. Sometimes I get very stuck for inspiration, and I can just leave and go back then when I feel like it. But as I say, video games is here to stay. Working, people at all age groups are buying into the whole video game thing now. In casual games and social games on apps on the iPhones and on tablets and phones and stuff like that. Again, it's booming now as well. The difference between social games, casual games, as opposed to console games. Console games are basically you want to sit down for hours on end playing one of these games. Casual game, you pick it up at the bus stop, you'll play the game, and you'll put it down when the bus comes or when you arrive at wherever you're supposed to be going or whatever. So the mindset is very, very different, and you have to bear that in mind as well when you're working on a project. Musically, if I have to work on a console game, I'm trying to draw in the player for hours on end. With social and casual games, you're only trying to draw them in a few minutes at a time. Really important to bear that in mind when you're working on projects as well. So, lots of companies, a lot of the names you'll recognise there. These are all old names and stuff. At this point, there's lots and lots of new names emerging all the time. These companies are buying out smaller companies in the industry as well, to try and certainly get a piece of the social and casual pie as well, because these companies will all make the casual and the bigger games, but they have so much money now they can buy up the smaller companies and help them grow and expand, because they know that it's a faster growing industry than social and casual games itself. And incidentally, video games are now, they have Hollywood in free fall. It's bigger than the film industry, way bigger. So that's pretty much me done. Thanks very much for taking the time to listen. If you have any questions in a little while. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick. Kylie. I have to apologise for pronouncing your name wrong.
No problem.
So next up we'll have Basil. He's going to talk to you about the art side of gaming.
All right. I've had about 2 coffees and 3 cans of Red Bull, so if I'm speaking too fast, slow me down. So my name is Basil Lynn. I am the artist. I'm technically the art director, but that's just a title. What I really do is I'm the artist and the animator for a company called Bismuth Games. And we're making a game called Coo, Shard of the Morrigan. It's based on Cuchullin's stories, but like we've re-changed it and made it modernized. And it's a steampunky kind of thing, so that's the future. But anyway, so what I do every day, 90% of my job is I come in, start with a pencil sketch, and the reason why we do that is we wanted to have a really unique style and visual style for the game. So we try to do as much like pencil sketching to keep the texture of the paper in, so it looks very kind of handmade and really grungy, compared to a lot of the whole clean Illustrator lines that you see in a lot of games these days. So we start off with a pencil sketch. I'll bring that to Photoshop, cut it out, color it, and put it into the game. And I also do the animation, which is in Flash. It's using a tool called the Bone tool, Inverse Kinematics. Essentially what it is you have a timeline and you tell the skeleton pose like this in one part and pose like this in the other part, and the program will do the in-betweens for you. So then I give that stuff to the guys who do the real magic, the programmers and the level designer, and we get that. So that's a few screenshots from our game. And most of the main software that I'd be using from a day-to-day basis is Photoshop, and that's what I do for painting. So you can use Photoshop is a really powerful tool. You can use it for photo image manipulation. You can use it for painting. You can use it for loads and loads of different things. It's very expensive, so a free alternative that could be good is GIMP. That's GNU Image Manipulation Program. I think it's open source, so it's free for everyone. Flash is where I do my animation, which is 2D animation. And Unity is the game engine, which we work in. And as Mick said, it's very easy nowadays. It's getting much and much easier for people to make high quality games with a very small team. You don't have to have these studios of hundreds and hundreds of people working on a game. Unity is absolutely free to get. You can download it right now. UDK is another game engine, and you can make your game in it and pretty much start selling it then. You need to buy a few licenses for Unity, and UDK, if you make over a certain amount of money, you need to start paying them royalties. But essentially, to build the game, it's absolutely free. And they're really good game engines. Everything is in there. Physics is in there. Collision is in there. You don't need to worry about very much stuff. You just need to put in your assets and your gameplay. So it's very easy nowadays to start your own, little indie studio, get your own game company. So a bit about my prior history. That's where I used to work. I spent 4 years as a biomedical physicist. That's what I studied. And then I went to do a work placement in Galway. They put me in a clean room. I have allergies. It's cold. Didn't like it. So, so I decided I wanted to do something else. Went back to college to do a course called Creative Digital Media. Nothing to do with games, but for some reason they paired us with the games guys, and the reasoning being that we were supposed to supply artwork and stuff, and the games guys would do the code. And that's where I met the team that I'm currently with today. So coffee is very important for game development. That's your number one tool, coffee. We used to get free coffee, we don't anymore. We're spending loads of money on coffee. But so does Owen. He's the game lead developer. Ralph is our sound and UI guy. Paul's our level designer, and I do the art. And we met in college in that course. Our game is actually a college final year project, and we started doing that. And we had a really poor prototype that was just made out of like scraps of paper, pretty much. You could barely move it on the iPad. We went with that to the NDRC, which is the National Digital Research Centre, and they invest in startups that they think could make something of themselves. So we got some money from them. From then we went on to the CSF, which is the Enterprise Ireland Competitive Start Fund. That's for high potential startups. And then we got some money as well from Forest na Gaeilge, because our thing has Irish culture in it, and it's going to be an Irish language game as well. Like you can swap between it. So through all these, we managed to get enough funding to keep us alive, but it's not that much. So a lot of us do part-time lecturing and giving speeches like this and talking to people. Like so, we do stuff on the side. I do some concept work on the side that I can't show, but basically we're on our budget shoestrings at the moment before we get big, because this game's not out yet. We're still working on it. But what I will say to you is the most important thing we found was experience and getting to know people. And where do you do that is you usually meet them at events, and the best kind of thing is where you can mix the two of them together. So there's the Dublin Gamecraft, the dates are there, and the Global Game Jam. They're both in Dublin. The Dublin Gamecraft is in the Engine House, which I'm not sure where it is, and Global Game Jam is in Griffiths College. And basically, both of them are the same principle. You get a whole bunch of people. Either you go there on your own and say, I can do this and this, I need a team that I want to work with, or you come with your own team, and they sit you in a room for, that one's 12 hours, this one's 48 hours, and you sit down and make your game. And it's a really good way because it's really high pressure, and you need to get something out at the end of it. So it's a really good insight into the game development process, because it's pretty much the same except over a longer period. There's high pressure, you need to cut things that you want to cut, that you wanted to put in, but you can't because of time. So it's a really good experience. The other thing that you can do to visit is, I've been talking for only half a minute.
No.
Jeez, I thought I was going really fast. All right, so the other thing that's really good is the Game Developer Conference. Now this is in San Francisco, so it's very, it's a bit more difficult for some people. And the price of the ticket is €1,500 for an all access pass ticket. But what you can do is what I did, And it's where we learned a lot of stuff. Like our game before we went there looked nothing like what it does now. It didn't play anything like what it is now. It was terrible compared to what it is now. And we basically went there, saw the level of games that was like on display, and we talked to people who were in the know. And from that, we came back and scrapped the whole thing, started again, and we've got to a stage where most people like our product now. But it's also really good for making contacts. I had a friend who was over there when he got his portfolio reviewed by Christian Slater, who is the art director of like Diablo 3 Blizzard. He just sat down with him 2 hours and went over his portfolio with him. Where else can you get that? Nowhere else. Like. If you call up this guy, he's not going to have time to take your call. It's only when it's a really good place for face-to-face meeting with like game developers, and this is attended by everyone, like from EA to like little indie companies who've been successful. And oh yeah, what I was saying is the ticket's $1,500, but what you can do is you can apply to be a volunteer, and if you're a volunteer, you get cheaper accommodation, you get your ticket paid for you, and you get food. So you need to pay for your flights now. So if you have the money, it's a really, really worthwhile thing to go over and have a look at the way the industry works. But you know, there's also local things that you can go to. So basically, in art, the big divide is basically between 2D and 3D. 2D being painted or hand animated pixel art, that kind of stuff. 3D where you start with polygons, and it's like a three-dimensional object that you work from. And the big difference basically is 2D is easier to do if you can draw. It's faster, you can create loads of assets. We went 2D exactly for that reason. 3D is more flexible. So with 3D, it takes a long, long time to make a character model, for example, but once you've made it, you can pose him, you can animate him, you can do loads of stuff with him. If you think that you made a mistake with his texture, you can go back and just replace it very easily, whereas in 2D, those animations that I do, sometimes we come up and go, that looks terrible in the game, we need to replace it, and that means I need to generate the whole sprite sheet all over again. I need to reanimate the whole thing, export it in. So it's a much bigger pipeline. Sorry, not a much bigger pipeline, but like to fix things takes more effort. And generally, the industry is getting divided into two different types of companies. One is the AAA companies, which Mick was talking about. That would be the larger companies who make, your Battlefield 3, your Skyrim, your Halos, that kind of stuff. Really big budget, loads of people working on it, huge amount of marketing in it. On the other hand, you get the indies, who are people like us, surviving on coffee, beans and toast, and very little money, but hopefully making something that sells a lot so we can keep going and make more games. So there's two different types of them. And in the AAA industry, your job as an artist would usually be very focused. So they have people who do only lighting, for example, people who do only the low poly modeling, which is like your actual in-game object, and there's people who do like the textures for just the textures for that in-game object, and that's all they do every day. So they're very specialized in that. So to get a job there, you usually have to be slightly a cut above the rest because you're so specialized in your job. They expect you to be very good at what it is. So that's one way of going for it. Or you can go the indie route, which is you either set up your own company or you work for a small indie company, and they're more generalists. So like, I'd say that I do the animation and the art, but I also do quite a lot of other stuff that, like, just a bit here and there. I wouldn't be an expert in any part of it, not nowhere near as much as the AAA guys, but I would have to know a little bit about everything. So there's two different routes that you can go down for game development. The most important thing, and you hear this from even the top guys, is practice, 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 practice. You roll out of bed, start drawing. If you go back to sleep, draw while you're in your sleep. Just keep doing it. The more practice you get, the better you get. And when it comes to art and games, most people don't generally look for a degree. Again, this is from the Blizzard guy, and basically what he says is, I really don't care what university you come from, what college you come from, what degree you have. If your portfolio shows me that you can draw, I'll hire you. And that's what he says. So like, don't worry if you can't get into the most prestigious university or whatever it is. The most important thing is your portfolio. And what that is a bunch of images that you've created yourself. And always be very selective when it comes to your portfolio. Don't show everything. A lot of people like to do, and I did this as well when I started, they like to show, oh look, I can do all this stuff, and look at me, aren't I great? Which is great, but they're going to look at the bad ones and go, well, you know, even if he was really good on one piece, that piece will be taken away when they look at the next piece and go, oh, that's kind of bad. So always pick your best pieces, even if you have 2 or 3 images, that's enough. I know people who've been hired from AAA Industries, from Blizzard, and he had 2 pictures in his whole portfolio. He just sent over 2 pictures of an environmental art, and the guy was like, you obviously know what you're doing, so they're going to hire you. And the other thing, which I think is almost just as important, is go outside. Don't just stay inside. Go learn about other styles, learn about other artists, learn about how they do their stuff, fine. But also go and get, you know, travel if you can, get more experience of the world. And the reason I say that is because the best artists, what you're doing as an artist in a game world is basically building a universe for the guy for the player to immerse themselves in. And the more realistic you can make that universe, or even if it's a totally weird universe that doesn't exist in real life. And what I mean is like say a leaf, the way the veins branch. If you draw that into a tree, that gives the player a subconscious like sense of realism and immersion that draws them a bit more in. So the more you know about stuff like this, anatomy and about like biology, natural history, evolution, the more you know about stuff like that, the better you are at creating this art for your game. So finally, I'm just going to put up, that's our company, that's our website, that's my email down at the bottom. I welcome you guys emailing me, asking me any questions you'd like. I also have the game on an iPad here, which you can come by and play later on if you want. I will also, if you guys have some drawings, I could try my best to give you some tips, what little knowledge I have. I'm not 30 years experience, like I've been doing this for about 2 years, but yeah, so if there's any questions for now, or that's it. Yeah.
Thanks, Basil and Mick. If any of you have any questions or anything, if you want to write them down, Tori will collect the sheets in a minute. I'm briefly going to tell you I've just highlighted a few third level courses. I don't know them all, and Mick would be more of an expert in the ones in music and sound. So Ballyfermot College of Further Education is a really good one for animation courses. So it starts off with the animation drawing studies. If you just want to get a feel for what it is, that's the foundation course, and then you can move on to do a Bachelor of Arts or a higher national diploma. They also have a games faculty, so there's computer games and interactive entertainment development and computer games design. And check out their open days for all of these colleges. I'm saying the best way to get an idea for what you want to do is to go to the open days from the colleges, and your schools will usually be really good at letting you go to the open days, so just go and say it to your teachers. IEDT have an animation course as well, and they also have model making design and digital effects, which would go into more of the 3D aspects as well as the art. And the guys will probably add more courses to this during the talk. Griffith College have a certificate in music production that's in collaboration with Windmill Studios, and I know Mick has run a short course in Windmill. Don't you run a short course?
Yeah.
Yeah, in games production as well, so I'm sure in music production, so I'm sure he'll tell you more about that. And Griffith have also started doing a springboard course, which is for people who already have a qualification and trying to get into a different area, so they'll probably move into doing a degree maybe or a diploma. And then IT Tala, just as another option, you can look at the creative digital media courses in colleges as well, and multimedia. The NCAD, fine art, things like that. General art courses would be good to go to as well. So those are just a few of them, and they're just Dublin-based courses, but just to give you an idea. So if anybody has any questions, if you want to hand them up, do you want me to collect them off you? Thank you. And we'll take questions from the floor as well, of course. So I'm just going to invite Mick and Basil to join me here. Okay, so Mick, ideal features for a demo, format, how many tracks, track length. Just so for a demo, what would be the kind of ideal features to have? So what format, how many tracks, and length?
Good question. Good demo, always start with what you think are your best tracks, not what you think might be the most relevant tracks, because ultimately, again, I mentioned perception earlier on. what audio people are actually looking for is not always what you think they're looking for. But if you can show them that, if you can show them the quality of your work is good by putting your best work first, that's really important. Don't bore them. Don't give them hours of stuff to listen through. 3 to 5 tracks is plenty. Don't make them too long. 2 minutes max a track, and try and show variation in your tracks. Don't have all your tracks suitable to one genre of music or to one game type, for example, or one scenario. Maybe break them up into demos so that you're covering all eventualities of different aspects of what the music is supporting. And make sure you label your demos as well, and always put contacts on a CD as well as on the case, on the covers, because they often get separated. Generally, the whole CD demo thing is going cold as well. Posting CDs, save your money. Really, people are auditioning digitally now anyway. So upload your work onto a site, whether it be YouTube or whether it be SoundCloud is a good one for audio, and send links to your audio tracks. That way, you've much better chance of having your music auditioned as opposed to from a CD. They really don't go down that route anymore. So I hope that helps.
Great. What's the most popular style of drawing in games?
Style of drawing?
Yeah. So I suppose style of what art style maybe is that what that question meant?
Oh yeah, whose question was that? Well, okay. Well, like, what do you mean by?
Like, what style is it? Kind of a manga style, or is it kind of a realistic or cartoony?
Okay. Because games are so diverse, there's also a diverse range of drawing styles within it. But each genre tends to have its own type of style, right? So like casual games, for example, they always have these thick, bold outlines, very bright, vibrant colors. For low attention span games, like it's for kids, basically designed as if you're for kids, because you want to have that low.
Would you give an example maybe of what a casual game?
Or like Angry Birds is a pretty simple example. And then when it comes to AAA titles, you kind of go 3D. So the drawing isn't as important anymore, but you kind of get more towards photorealistic. So like the way, I don't know if you guys have done 3D work before, but like the way a 3D model works is there is a person, he's got like polygons on him, which are basically squares, that these are in 3D engine, and that gets cut out and stretched. It's almost like if you skin an animal, that thing gets stretched. Not that's literally what it's called pelt unwrapping, and it's exactly the same. You skin your model, and then 2D textures go on top of that. They become realistic. They become put onto the model, and they generally tend to be more realistic, photorealistic. So they'd use a lot of photographic textures, and they'd use a lot of like stuff from the real world kind of thing. And those were the two main styles. Now we're getting into the indie genre coming up, where they're trying to go retro. So they have all little 8-bit pixel sprites. So it really depends on your target demographic. If you're trying to do an indie game that appeals to guys who used to play games in the 80s, you will do that little pixely drawn style. If you're trying to do a AAA game for like people who play Halo, you need to go photorealistic. Like we've got comments in our game in Greenlight going like, where's your anti-aliasing, where's your like stuff that only applies to 3D, because they're so used to this that they want this photorealism. It just depends on the genre you're going for. The best thing to do is look at your competitors in that genre and follow them, but do also try to be unique and have your own visual style. Dishonored is a really good one. That's just out now. Am I talking too long?
No.
Yeah. Dishonored is a really good one now, where it's an example of where they did something different, where it's a fully 3D game in a 3D environment, but all the textures are hand painted and it looks very painterly, even on a 3D model. And it's a really interesting way of doing it. So like, the more unique you are, to a certain extent, it's better in some ways.
In the games industry, because it's so diverse, would people generally stick to one style, or would you try to kind of become confident in a lot of different styles? I know with the big industries, you said it's important to get really good at something, but if you're, I suppose, an indie developer, you probably have a style.
So, I mean, obviously the best case scenario is if you can do every single style under the sun and you're amazing at all of them, but that's not going to happen. Usually you do try to be competent in a few different styles, so like, but a lot of people do specialize. And that said, you don't have to be locked into one certain style just because everyone, like the Mass Effect 3 guy, the guy who does the concept art for Mass Effect 3, he does it all in comic style. The game is nothing, it doesn't look anything like a comic book, it's very kind of photorealistic, but all the concept art for that is done in very comic book style. As long as you're good enough at a certain thing, whatever it is, like if you're a concept art, if you're a concept artist, your job is to get over the feel of the universe. If you're really good at that, it doesn't really matter what style you have. Whereas if it comes to like, if you want to go and make a Modern Warfare game, you're obviously going to have to know how to put on these gritty textures and the realistic stuff. It just depends on what kind of company and game you're looking to work for. So tailor it towards that, I guess.
Mick, we'll go back to you for this question. If you could develop music for any game, what would it be?
Probably fantasy game. Maybe Zelda, but there's big shoes to fill there.
You should come to our game. We're trying to copy Zelda.
There you go. Thanks very much for the invite. Fantastic, yeah. So yeah, fantasy games and legend, yeah, fantasy legend games.
Are there any games in particular that you would say that you have played? Like, do you play games yourself to get an idea of the, the music? So is there any games that you find that you think that, the music is really impressive, or that they've tried something a bit different maybe? Or
Journey. Yeah. That's a wonderful score in Journey, and that was really thinking from a different perspective when that was scored, and it was beautifully done. Mm-hmm. And it really, that's a wonderful fantasy game, mm-hmm. and the music in it really brings you into the fantasy world, but not just a fantasy world, but a fantasy world that feels different to other fantasy worlds that you might have gone into as a player before, and that was the object of that of the game and the score in that game, and it was achieved beautifully. Yeah.
Do you think it's an aspect of games that people don't really appreciate or understand, that it's a big component, that they just take it for granted?
I think very much so, but I think it's really important because you shouldn't really notice the score as such, but you should notice if it's missing, and also you should notice that you're responding to something in the game and to the music in the game and how the game is making your experience feel. That's the music in the game doing its job. Mm-hmm. But it's really important in game to have no music as well, as important as the music score itself, mm-hmm. just from sound and generally the sound design in games as well. I mean, the acoustic audio palette of a game is as important about immersing the player in the game as music. I'm talking about just the ambience. If you're in a woods and there's birds chirping, or there's, if you're in a warehouse and there's, something falls behind and you hear the echo of the reverb in the room, that's all part of the soundscape. Really important. Too often, composers try and throw the kitchen sink. They're trying to have music in there, full-on epic score in every corner of the game. So that's it's too much.
So like in design, how white space is important as well as your content, kind of in graphic design or web design.
Absolutely.
So that silence is important.
It is as important as where there's audio. Yeah.
A similar question, Basil. Is there any games that you really admire the art in, or that you look at and you say, I wish I had done that art?
Nearly every game that's out there. Personally, the way I work is I find the best thing is to look at the games that are successful and always try and work towards all of them. I get inspiration from nearly everywhere. I try to find it everywhere. But if I had to choose, Bastion is a really, really gorgeous game. It's very hand-painted world, and that's very detailed and very lush. It is a really unique environment that they've built up. And on the other hand, you've got Limbo, which is basically shadows, and I think that's gorgeous as well. Just the way they've used very, very simple shapes to make it feel very realistic and to suggest in your mind things that aren't necessarily there.
Any questions from the floor? keep going. So just for both of you, I suppose we'll go back to Mick and start on this. If you're in school now and you want to start out, you're interested in this industry, what kind of advice or routes do you think that students should take, you know, in terms of maybe courses or, you know, work experience if you're in transition year or anything like that, you know, even to get an idea of whether or not you feel it would be something for you?
Yeah, I think it's important. If there's a course going that's not really going to cost you anything to do it. That's my first advice. If it's going to cost you to do a course and you're going to choose from a number of courses, choose the one that is going to bring you to the next, get you to the next stage, as opposed to choosing one because it might sound cooler, or it might because your friends are doing it and you say, oh, I'll tag along and do it. But most importantly is immerse yourself in a community of people who are thinking in the same sphere and that want to be in, you know, want to move into the field of games and stuff. So it's a matter of making new friends. Really, when you leave college or school or whatever, you know, your friends tend to move in different directions, or you might go to college and share a house together. And I've got a son in Dublin sharing a house with 3 of his mates that he did the Leaving Cert with and was in school for years, but they're now in 3 separate colleges in Dublin, but they all share a house, but they're all in different interests and different fields. So really open up in when you do start in college, or, you know, open up to you know, making new friends in an area that there's interest, and strike up projects together. Just say, look, let's do something. Let's make a game. As we said, there's free technology to use there on the internet as well. So playtime, just enjoy yourselves and have fun at it. Don't take it too seriously at first, you know, because it is all about it's about doing it for the love of it as well. If you're trying to get into games to become rich, think twice about it. I think there's other ways to get rich quicker than getting into the games industry. But if you do get into it and you start to carve and forge a career for yourself, it's really exciting and it's really, really rewarding and enjoyable. But that's not because of the money. It's because you're doing what it is you love to do. So do it. Be passionate about your work, and you will do well. That's would be my advice around that.
And is there do you know of any kind of internship or work experience opportunities that students could look at in, you know, transition year, or alternatively college students? You know, would people be open to, you know, I don't know, have you ever taken people on for work experience, or to get an idea of what the industry is about, or anything like that? Yeah, that's
a good question, Emma, because unfortunately, as I explained earlier on, that music and games is practically non-existent here, and there are no support structures or courses in place. There are some coming online. I'm involved in trying to get others into line. I've met with the Minister of Education about getting some stuff brought into university curriculum as well, and we're looking at that as well. But also for transition year, I want to see a programme that's available for people to get involved in, where they can make music for games and get some kind of experience in transition year as well. So there is talk about that at the moment, and we do have another meeting pending with the Minister to try and get that moved forward as quickly as possible. As it stands, work experience in games, I don't know offhand where I would point anybody in, but we're trying to change that. Maybe maybe Basil might have other ideas around that. There are websites out there like Games Ireland, and there are game developers' websites as well. Go on there and blog and say, look, does anybody want anybody to do work experience? I'll do it for tea and sandwiches or whatever, you know. Just get yourself in there, in any opportunity for experience that you can. But it is limited to where I could point you at this moment, and I'm hoping that will change very soon, though.
Mm-hmm. And similar to you, Basil, so if you're in school and you're thinking about going to art college, or you think you might be interested in, games, art in particular, what kind of advice would you have to students, even in terms of what software you might pick up?
Okay, so the first thing I will say is I said GIMP was a free software that's kind of like Photoshop, but personally, I would try, however, in whatever way you can, to get industry standard, because when you apply for a studio, they don't want to have to retrain you in the software that they use. So, like Photoshop, if you can get it, is basically the industry standard for painting and texturing. The good thing about 3D stuff is Autodesk pretty much owns all the 3D suites that most companies use. So they have Maya, they have 3ds Max, they've got ZBrush and Mudbox. And what Autodesk will do is when you're in college, you can apply to them to show I'm a student, and they'll give you a 3-year license for their software for free, all their software, the entire suite. So you can train yourself up on that. Regarding like art colleges and stuff like that, I have a bit of a bias because I'm self-taught pretty much. I did the creative digital media course, but like the stuff I learned that I'm using now, I learned on my own, and there's really good resources out there. 3D Total is a book publishing company that does stuff like that. Focal Press is another one, and Imagine FX. I don't know if you any know that, but they do like this is how you paint, and they have a magazine that comes out every month. That's about like €7 or something like that. So like a cup of coffee and a bagel. That's just don't go without that for a day. And they're pretty good resources. There's a lot of free stuff online as well. So it is very easy to teach yourself. My problem with taught courses is that taught courses can be really, really, really good depending on who's in charge of the course, or they can be really, really bad. And it can be really bad if you get someone who's used to doing his own way, because in games, as I've talked about, there's so many different styles and so many different ways of doing things that if a guy goes, no, you're wrong, you should be doing it this way, you might learn the wrong thing. I mean, conversely, if you've got an amazing teacher, you will learn way more. But the best part to do it yourself is to try it by going online. Before, like most of you, I assume, haven't gone to college yet. So what you can do from now is start making some portfolio pieces, put them on conceptart.org. There's Gnomon Workshop. They have forums that even run competitions every month. And if you might win some CDs, like Gnomon does really good DVD tutorials, and if you enter your artwork, who knows, you might win something. And even if you don't win something, the guys on there are really helpful, and they'll go, this is what you need to improve yourself. And personally, I think you get a lot of really good advice from there. If you were to go and try get a games art course specifically, there isn't really one in Ireland at the moment that I know of that can cater for that. Ballyfermot is pretty good with their 3D animation course, but aside from that, there's not much game specific. So you need to go to places like New York or California. They have very, very good game art courses over there. But if you can't, it's almost as good just to work on your own time and send stuff to these forums and get peer feedback, because the people frequenting these forums are the people who work in industry, and they're the ones who know exactly what they're going to look for when they hire you. So they're the best people to get advice off.
What are the forums?
Conceptart.org is one. It's kind of dead at the moment. It kind of spurts up and down. Gnomon Workshop is very good. That's GNOMON Workshop.
That's an interesting point, if I could just elaborate on what Basil was saying there. One key difference between working as an artist in games and as a composer in games is, as Basil was explaining, if you're going to get work in industry, you got to know how the software works and stuff like that. They don't want to have to retrain you and stuff like that. As a composer working in games, we're probably the only aspect of the game that is brought in as a contractor, as outside. We're never involved in the studio. You don't go into the studio every day to work on the game. You're working from home, and the power of the internet and stuff. You're sending the tracks over that way, and your Skype calling to whatever changes need to be made. Composers are always the ones outside of the project studio, if you like, always brought in as contractors. So it doesn't really matter what software you're using or how you're putting your stuff together. They won't care as long as what they're hearing is what they want. So software that you choose to use, your own preference, is the way to go. However, I would recommend, if it's something that you're just deciding to get into, Apple is better than, I know it's more expensive, but if you can get a cheaper Apple is better for music in the long run than PC, because as you move further on down the road, for now anyway, it's been that way for years. But I swear by it. I'm not, I'm not being paid to say this. I wouldn't mind a free computer, of course, but that doesn't happen with them. But there's like Logic is a great music software, and that's owned by Apple as well. So it works really well in the Apple system. So if you can go down that route, GarageBand is free anyway, and you can get that on your iPhone now even. So the freeware stuff is great for playing and experimenting with, but try if you can get yourself into some fairly stable software. I would recommend Logic.
And if you want to use any software like that, the Mac Lab and the Rural Red has Logic and everything like that. So I can't remember. Sorry. And Photoshop. They have the industry software. So I can't remember the hourly rate. You have to get a membership, and then I think it's $250 for an hour to go and use. So really good computers, and they've got all the industry software. So if you can't get a Mac, they are really expensive, or the software, but you want to kind of play around with them. Rural Red is just there. Great facilities.
And incidentally, if you're looking at buying a computer with a college grant or whatever, you don't have to always go for the brand new spanking computer that's brilliant for what it'll do for Facebook and fast internet and stuff. A second-hand Mac is a better investment as a workhorse than to buy a brand new PC in my mind anyway. Certainly that's the advice I've given my son. He wants to buy a new computer and he's looking for something fairly flash. I said, why don't you buy a second-hand Mac, and it'll be much better for as a workhorse. So he's done that, and I'm very glad that he went down that route. So do bear in mind there are options when it comes to Macs as well. And I think with the software as well, there's certainly student packages as well. Like Logic is really, really inexpensive in the bigger picture of things when it comes, if you're a student and stuff. So, wave your student card at everybody and anybody when it comes to trying to put a home studio together. A lot of them are very, student friendly in that way.
Any questions? Yep.
Yeah. How do you get inspiration, for a score, if you're working on a game? Do you go and play games, or do you just listen?
Very good question. It is valuable to know how other composers approach games, and as I would play, rather than play one game in that genre and get too locked in on that score, I would play a number of games and try and pick out the common thread in the music that seems to apply to the genre, as opposed to try and lock into another composer's style. So you might find by listening to the scores of different games, or film is probably a better way, rather than playing the game, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the game as well, and the music might be different each time you play it. As I say, if it's a fantasy game, hire out a fantasy movie, get Harry Potter out or something like that, or a few movies, and have a listen to them and see what instrumentation they use to get that fantasy sound. Like you'll find they use glockenspiels, they'll use pizzicato strings, they'll use light piano as opposed to heavy. Pardon?
Harpsichord?
Harpsichord, possibilities for harpsichord as well, yeah. So a lot of tinkling stuff going on. They'll use there'll be lots of belly type sounds as well in fantasy, and high strings as opposed to low strings. They'll make it sound quite airy as well, and that so that and magical is a real key word, and that's really important too. If you're being asked to pitch for a game, or at any point, if somebody says, "I'd like you to do a demo from a game," get key words off them. What do they want the music to evoke? And with fantasy, like magical is one important word to be used, and usually uplifting. you know, mystery, all those words apply. So your music has to suggest that. So play games in the genre, more than one, and watch movies in the genre, more than one as well, and try and pick out what instruments are being used as commonly in all of the scores you listen to, as opposed to trying to listen to what the composer's doing, and even trying to do what he is what it is he's doing. Listen to the instrumentation. That would be my advice.
Anybody else? At what stage in the process do you come in, Mick? Obviously at the start they pick the composer, but like what stage is the game at when you're actually composing?
Often what happens is, more often than, and sadly more often, what happens is music is left, particularly by the indies, I have to say, till the last minute, and the budget is usually pretty exhausted, so they've overspent, and it's like, how do we solve our music question now with no money, and they've got to be, you know, you've got to be innovative at how you solve that. But ideally the composer should be involved from the concept stage, because at that point the music can be really brought in to become part of the game experience. It can also become part of you know, it can direct players through the game as well. So that can be really, you can really sit down and map it out and give it more of a you know, more of a place in the game. And the bigger companies, like the AAA people and all that, will involve a composer at a very early stage, because they see the process of music in the game as important as concept art, for example. There's concept music, because the music often will need tweaking as it goes along. Or what happens is, like console games, AAA games take longer to make than app games or casual games as such. And what happens is, through the course of the game might take a year to make or whatever, and all of a sudden they discover there's another game coming out by another company that's quite close, so there's a panic and they go into redesign, and they redesign so many aspects of the game, including the music, that you have to bin the music that you started out with, and there's a new you know, a new take on it. So they like to involve composers at an early stage. It's a good idea to involve composer from the word go at concept stage.
Returning to an earlier thing that you touched on, Basil, I have a question here about portfolio networks, but the same kind of with SoundCloud and things like that. Is it important to start building up your profile online in terms of a portfolio, or getting your sound clips up there? How important is that, do you both feel, in the two areas?
Do you want to take it first?
Sure, it's extremely important, because people want to look and try and find out as much of you as they can, about you as they can. If you don't have a website, if you can't afford to have a website done up, get a Facebook page or MySpace or something, and just be, just make sure that people can access you and find you on the net some way. And there's always a way of dressing something up as well. You may not have done many things, but whatever it is you do, try and find a way of putting a spin on it, like so that the perception of who you are is somebody that they want to find out more about. I'm more interested to take a closer look at this person than that person because of how they present, and it doesn't matter if you've done nothing, or because it's chicken and egg. You've got to get the experience, and some people will say, well, we're looking for experienced people, so how do you get that experience? And find ways of doing stuff for free, and then find ways of putting a spin on it. If you have if you've got a friend in PR and journalism, whatever, a local paper, see will they write about it, see will they give you some coverage on it, so that you can attach something to it, and just find a way to make it bigger than it is, no matter how small it is, because it's relevant. Everything you do is relevant, because it's relevant because it's experience. And just try, if you can ham it up, go for it.
For Image portfolios is exactly the same. Even if you start off, like I know what I said, only have the best images up there. That is still true, but still do it at the start, because even I know loads of artists who are really scared about their work and they're like, no, it's not good enough, I don't want to put it up. And if you do that, then you'll never know whether it's good enough or not, because nobody will be there to tell you what you can improve or what you can do. So even at the start, absolutely put your portfolio up on DeviantArt, Flickr, everywhere you can, really. As Mick said, make a Facebook page. The most important thing you want to do when you're making a portfolio is make it easily accessible. Most people, when they look for the portfolio of the artist, they don't really care how awesome your web design skills are and you have a flashy website with stuff that flies in left and right. I get portfolios a lot of the time. Unfortunately, we're not hiring that many people, but even sometimes when I try to look at someone to remember them for future, and I might be on my phone on the Lewis and I can't access their page because it's got, I don't know, it's not mobile friendly. So if I can't access your page, it's going to make it more difficult. Make it as easy as possible for whoever it is to look at your portfolio to find it. That's the first thing. And yeah, always have it up even from the early stages. And then as you get better, and you will get better as you get more feedback, take down those old ones and put up the new ones. And because they're not going to remember who you are. If you send the art director a portfolio, he's not going to go, oh, Basil Lim, this guy is pretty bad right now, I'm going to stick his name up there and always remember him, so if he ever comes back to me again, I'm not going to hire him. They don't do that, they forget you. So don't be afraid. Put your portfolio up. Once you get better, take down the old images, put up the good ones. And to find the good ones, again, go to those forums and ask them which ones are my best ones, and they'll usually tell you, and then you can, the best way to learn is by putting your stuff out there so people can see. And you never know, you might think you're bad, but still get jobs. I've got jobs from times when I look back and I go, oh, I really couldn't draw back then, but I still got jobs back then. Very little, low-paying jobs, but still, I got jobs. So it's everything counts towards your experience. As Mick said, try and put a spin in it as well. Try and be like, you know, if you did one picture for a friend who's involved in a little indie film production, you go, film production companies came to me for concept artwork. It's not really a lie. It's kind of more like, you know, jazz it up.
And remember as well, listen to your critics being family and friends and stuff, what you perceive to be bad work. If everyone's telling you, no, that's my favourite, that piece of art is your best work, and you're going, no, I don't like that, or that piece of music is that's my favourite, and if everyone is saying that and you're going, really, I don't like it, listen to your critics. You know, it's, again, other people's perception of your work is very important. Don't shut out that work that you think is bad, because it may be your best work.
Exactly, and but that said, I will say, be very, very skeptical of what you hear from Mum, because Mum will say everything's awesome and you're my lovely little boy and you're great, but just be careful. The best feedback you'll get, and sometimes it's very, very harsh and it can be hard to take, especially at the start, is on the internet, because on the internet loads of people are anonymous. DeviantArt is a little too, sometimes they're very friendly. Concept art, .org, they're usually a bit more like candid about the realism. And because they are anonymous, sometimes the criticism you get can be very harsh. But don't let that get you down. Just take it aboard and work towards making it better.
Any last questions?
My son is in junior cert and he's really interested in the art side of things, and I know you're saying that the college is in America and that's English speaking, but if you were to say to him to do a language, which would be better? Like it's French or German. Now he's doing French, and I'm trying to motivate him.
Specifically for art?
Well, you know, to get into animation and that.
Okay.
And like a few months ago, there was some film that won awards, and it was done in Paris. So I said to him, "Oh, it's a good thing you're doing French. You know, you might end up there." So, in your experience, which is, you know, French or German, are the two of them?
Well, I don't know. I guess you're talking about which colleges would be better to go to, either French or German colleges, is that it?
Or
Language
even
to learn.
a language. You know, he's doing history, art, and technology, which I think is a really good combination for what he's interested in. And I'm just thinking that, you know, okay, he might go to America, that and his English.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But I'm wondering which is, in your experience with the people you've met in that, is French or German the best?
Well, I mean, both of them are pretty good because France is very, very big right now in the games industry, and so is Germany. The main differences between them is the German industry is a little bit more adventure games and kind of more fantasy, real-time strategy. They're very into those games because of the limitations they have there on laws on violence and laws on blood and that kind of stuff, and that kind of almost creates this, the games that come out are very, you know, historical, that kind of stuff. So if he's more interested in that, then German might be a better way to go. The French studios, just from word of mouth, seem to be better places to work at. And they seem to do kind of more groundbreaking stuff and more new stuff. Like Dishonored came from a French studio, Arcane Studios, and that has one of the best art I've seen in a 3D game for a long time. So he's not really gonna, you know, it's not really gonna matter either way. Pretty much both of them are good, but French is definitely a good way.
Doing French.
Yeah, that'd be
I
fun.
want motivation. So I'll say Basil said.
Anybody
Don't tell him my
else?
name.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, for Mick, you're working with musicians. I kind of more similar. I'm more familiar with working as a session musician. How is sort of the scene for like any musician who kind of wants to get into like get video game kind of music, like, or sort of playing music for video games, you know, just playing or even composition.
As a musician or as a composer, like
As a musician, like you're.
Yeah, it depends on it depends on who's doing the gig, the music gig for the game. What's your instrument? Guitar?
Yeah.
So do they need a guitarist? And you know, put yourself out there with the studios that may use session players and stuff. Are you talking creatively though? Are you talking about creating a game score as a guitar player?
Well, like that would be my first choice, but like obviously, that'd be my first choice. But obviously, like doing like sort of session kind of work.
Okay.
Would be something I would consider as well. I don't know. It's not really down to you, is it? It's really down more to the studio.
No, it's entirely down to the composer who they use. Entirely, the studio don't get involved in the production of the music. The composer gets to choose who the musicians are that will play on the project, what orchestra will be used, what conductors get used. Everything, like the composer has to deliver the end product, but how he gets there is entirely up to him. The only thing that we have to do is justify the expense that we're going through to get there. So in other words, if I say I've employed a guitarist, bass guitarist, drummer or whatever, and singers or orchestra and stuff, and I present them with those expenses, I have to show that I've used these musicians on the game, on the score of the game. But who I use, entirely up to me. They don't have a say.
And what about the system of royalties?
There are none in games. It's goodbye. It's a buyout. And Codemasters own the score that I did for Body Count, Lock, Stock and Barrel. I can't even use it. I can perform it, and they don't have the intellectual rights to live performances and stuff. I can perform the work. I have the performance royalties for the performances will come to me, but they have to sanction that. Basically, they have to agree that they can come to me, because they can't go to them. It's not, they can't own the intellectual rights to the composition of the performance. So the performance royalties have to come back to me, but they have to go through them to get to me. So you have to have them on your side, because they can't get them. But they own the mechanical royalties. So in other words, if they release the soundtrack as an album, all the money that's made from that is theirs. I can't use the music for a film, or I can't use it in, I can't use it in other projects and stuff. And technically, I have to ask their permission to have that music on my website. It's almost, you don't ask and they don't say, but if they wanted to be sticky about it, they could say, can you take down that? We didn't give you permission to use it. Now they'd want to be, it's discreetly not done, but by law, they have the right I should ask any chance that I can put the music I composed on my website. Is that okay with you guys? So yeah, it's crazy, but it's a buyout, yeah.
If I can jump in on that, that's the way the AAA, so Codemasters is the way they did it with Mick, obviously, but I know it's a lot more flexible with indies. So the way we ourselves are working is that we have the music in the game, and we will push the soundtrack as an album, and the artists get all the royalties from that. That's the same way as Bastion, which is another indie game. Well, they're published by Warner Brothers, but they're pretty much an indie company, and that's the way they did it. Darren Korb is a composer, and it's brilliant. I think it's a really good soundtrack, and the way they do it, as far as I know, is that they have the music in the game, but the soundtrack will be separate on Bandcamp or whatever it is, and the composer will get the royalties for that. That's just the way the indies work out, because a lot of indies, as Mick said, run out of budgets, don't have money to pay the composer, and then they're like, okay, so what we can do is do this for you instead. It's a little bit more flexible with indies, but then you get you don't get paid up front. Sometimes is the danger of that.
Okay, good, thanks.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thanks a million to Mick and Basil. Just really quickly, for those of you who weren't here last week, sorry, for those of you who were, I just want to tell you really quick about this website, yam.ie, your arts map. So it's a new arts and cultural listings website for young people in Dublin. So it's your arts map, meaning that you can get on there, find events for you, so gigs, workshops, films, exhibitions, but you can also submit your own events. So if you're running, an exhibition, a film night, anything like that, you can get on there, put it up, and it'll get promoted to young people to come along. So I'm going to give you a short survey now to fill out, and at the bottom of that you can select whether or not you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter, but also go onto Facebook. We're there, you can like us, and we're on Twitter as well. So and we have some badges to give out as well.